Uncle Dan.
What? What do you want?
Sometimes on the show there's some idols of human worship that we like to take down a peg.
And some of those idols are humans themselves.
Yep.
And boy, do we, there's nothing finer than taking a symbol of goodness and love and light and human kindness and just shitting all over it.
Just take a big drippy shit on it.
So
big tandoori shit on it.
We've brought in Uncle Mark to do just that. Uncle Mark, who are you dropping your turd on today?
Well, this is going to be a good one. So, part of our prime directive here on the show, fellas, is that
is ruining things for people.
Pretty much, right? I mean, we encourage people and ourselves to hold things up to the light and give them a hard look.
Yeah.
And especially things that we've been taught to consider as, like settled morality.
Right.
So today I want to talk about a perfect example of, and I'm using audio air quotes, settled morality, and see how easily something we've all been taught to take for granted as good can maybe be shown not to be.
What? Impossible.
So, and this is...
Are you going after Scotch tape?
I'm going after Scott Baio.
Or scot-free.
And his Scotch tape consumption.
Right.
I think that has become a crisis. So
it's a problem.
So there is something about the cult of Jesus that is so deranging and so disfiguring to some people that if I live 1,000 years, I will never understand it. So, this weird, shambolic, but on balance, decent story of love, turning the other cheek, service and kindness to the least of these, it seems to inspire so much barbarity.
Yeah.
Like in the medieval Inquisitions or the 16th and 17th century colonial conquests and the slave trade, to now where we see so much delight in seeing the unfortunate suffer and become even less fortunate, like in modern American conservative Christianity.
Right.
Or the sort of straight-up sadistic suffering kink of people like today's subject. And today's subject is a familiar name to everyone, Agnes Boyaciu.
Oh, yeah.
Old Agnes
Boyaciu, who was born in 1910 in a part of the now-deceased Ottoman Empire that we know as Albania. Mm-hmm. Beautiful weather. But we really know Agnes Boyaciu by her S&M dungeon name, Mother Teresa. Or more formally, the newly sainted Teresa of Calcutta.
Yeah.
So Teresa has become synonymous even far outside the Catholic sphere with goodness and selflessness and sacrifice. But as we'll discuss, the only one of those words that really applies to her is the last one. So,
yeah. She's you know what? I'm going to regale you with a quick thing because just yesterday I was watching some old footage of a TV show where Michael Palin and John Cleese from Monty Python went onto a TV show. This was just after the release of Life of Brian.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
An Anglican bishop or something?
Yeah. And they were sort of in this awful debate. And, the bishop that they were talking to and some other guy, I don't remember what his position was, could not for the life of them understand what the Pythons were trying to do and what
with the Life of Brian.
With the Life of Brian. And one of the things that they talked about, and both of them mentioned this, was how much that movie would have hurt the feelings of Mother Teresa. They said it so many times.
I did a spit take on the microphone.
Do a spit take because this is how important she is to the world. Now, this is not a Catholic priest. This was an Anglican bishop.
Right.
But you would hurt Mother Teresa's feelings so deeply because she loved the Lord Jesus so much.
Yeah. Who by the way, that Anglican bishop was wearing a gold cross around his neck that must have weighed 12 pounds.
Yeah.
That could have fed all of the kids of Calcutta for a decade.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
So that is the level of saintitude.
Yep.
Yeah.
Long before she was canonized.
Yeah.
That this woman had about her.
She's so in the bloodstream as the paragon of goodness.
Yeah.
Right.
And so let's discuss that paragon of goodness a little bit. So, this obscure Albanian weirdo made her way to India via Ireland, actually. In 1929.
That's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, you got to go west to get east.
That's a long way.
Where she was actually on the Santa Maria. She took the long way
They
around.
dropped her off in Ireland.
So she took her vows in 1929 and taught at various schools until 1946. when she felt called to serve the poor in Calcutta whilst living among them.
That sounds nice.
Nothing wrong with that. So at the time, Calcutta was experiencing a crisis because there had been a huge famine in Bengal. And then the outbreak of interreligious violence in the region began because this was right before the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947.
Right.
So and Calcutta is kind of right on the borderlands there with Bangladesh and India. So good for her. And so with only a few weeks of medical training, so basically none, she set up the first of what she would call her Houses of the Dying, her term,
Nice.
in 1948. Simply put, these repurposed buildings, and most of them were just warehouses, were not really hospitals. They were places where the impoverished sick were given a cot and allowed to die with, at best, minimal medical care and almost no pain management of any kind. So,
Well, she really needed help with the marketing side of her business, didn't she?
No, she did not.
The marketing side was the only thing that actually fucking worked. So if you don't believe me, believe the editor of the highly respected medical journal, The Lancet, Dr. Robin Fox. And when Fox visited her Calcutta death houses in 1994, the death house thing just kills me. I mean, that's
94?
in 1994.
That late in the game.
He noted the misprescribing of what paltry drugs they had, no real diagnostic program at all, meaning even if someone got drugs, who the fuck knew if they were the right ones?
Right.
There was no lab to run even the simplest blood tests, etc. He said, Mother Teresa prefers providence to planning. Her rules are designed to prevent any drift towards materialism. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, well, you don't want a materialistic...
I mean, if you define materialism as I would like to remain alive or at very least not die in agony,
You
please,
selfish brat.
then sure, she was determined to prevent that. So if you don't believe him, maybe believe Mary Loudon, who volunteered in the Calcutta death houses for some time and knew them well. She describes the places looking like photos of liberated concentration camps after World War II.
Jesus.
She saw non-trained nuns acting as nurses, washing dull IV needles under tap water in order to reuse them,
Jesus.
and a lack of pain medication beyond aspirin. In another room, her boyfriend, who was also volunteering there, was hopelessly tending a sick 15-year-old boy. It was very important to Mother Teresa that the women die separately from the men, because that's just manners.
Right.
So he was attending this sick 15-year-old kid who had a simple kidney issue that had gotten much worse in the death house. She asked the staff why they wouldn't take him to the hospital for emergency surgery. She said, all you have to do is get a cab, take him to the nearest hospital and demand he get treatment, get him an operation. Her boyfriend replied, they don't do it. They won't do it. If they do it for one, they'll do it for everybody. And she said, but this kid is 15.
Yeah. This was, I mean...
And he just died.
When you say house for the dying, it sounds like a nice place where someone who is terminally ill can convalesce until the end of their dying day.
Shady Meadows sounds like a place where you go for your dying day.
Well, yeah.
The House of the Dying sounds exactly like
Well,
what
yeah,
it is.
no, you're right. It sounds more like a Game of Thrones.
Imagine the family having to write the hospice check. Okay, so that's House of the Dying. So, by the way, I'm relying heavily on Christopher Hitchens' amazing expose here called "The Missionary Position," as well as a BBC documentary that he contributed to called "Hell's Angel," both of which I highly recommend anyone wanting more info on this. But there are also plenty of other corroborating sources for the conditions in her Houses of the Dying.
Like she had, and you're saying houses because it wasn't just like one little tent.
By the time of her own death, which we'll talk about, they were in over 100 countries.
Oh my God!
And they even have penetration into the United States, where they, there is certainly a super poor indigent population here to take advantage of, but mostly she was focused on shaming houses where men with AIDS specifically, died. And,
good.
So we're basically just kind of shamed every day.
So at least they made some ailing gay men feel bad in their final days. That's nice.
I mean, what's the point of being Catholic?
But so basically, her shtick was they're not dying on the street. They're loved in their final moments. I mean,
so Calcutta.
What's the actual pitch for her?
Well, I'll kind of get to it, but the pitch is she wasn't interested in fixing poverty or alleviating pain, right? And so where was she going to go where there's enough raw material for this kind of sadism? Not Belgium, right? She's got to go to a place with a massive refugee crisis,
Right.
where there's an enormous amount of homelessness and institutional, generational poverty.
Right.
So you go to Calcutta. If you want sick poor people, you go to where the sick poor people
Yeah, I
are.
guess what I was asking is, what is she saying? Because I know that she had millions of donors who were
Yeah.
giving just gobs of money.
Yeah.
What is she saying to them that she's doing? What is her? What are
right.
they believing?
I'll continue. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, okay.
So, like this 15-year-old kid who died of Catholic torture fetishization, former sisters in Teresa's own order, the Missionaries of Charity, have described not only needless suffering among the truly terminal, but careless and stupid practices like failing to segregate people with tuberculosis.
Oh, my God.
Therefore dooming all without it to potentially contracting it.
Right.
Among countless other malpractices, they also were instructed to either coerce or secretly perform Catholic baptism on all patients. Most of whom had lived and planned to die as Muslims or Hindus, right? In that region.
What are you doing with the water there? What are you
So,
sprinkling me with?
Honestly,
right now?
so for the unwilling, a nun would pretend to be wiping the forehead with a damp cloth
God damn it.
while quietly praying.
Oh, so you piece of shit.
You're fucking with them in this life.
Wait, a nun can baptize you? I thought a priest had to.
Apparently, I guess if it's
If they're not willing, the Lord will take what he can get.
when in Calcutta, so you're fucking him in this life, you might as well fuck him in the next as well.
Sure.
And a small but fun decorating idea for any psychopathic sadists out there: her morgues had a cheerful little sign hanging in them that read, "I'm going to heaven today."
Aw, she's saving them.
Fucking crazy.
You replace the one that said 0 days since. Something.
It's so funny because it's that, like, every Christian child and probably most religious children who believe in who are taught about a better afterlife.
Yeah.
Every single one of us had that moment where we go, well, why don't we just kill everybody then?
Right. Why don't we kill ourselves and go? So then, of course,
But then somebody like gets mad at you and smacks you and says, "Don't talk like that," and then you just know that you're not allowed to think.
well,
that
then they
thought
say
anymore.
it's murder. So
right,
you can't. You go to
right,
hell.
or whatever. But she clearly she just took that all the way.
Yeah.
She took that
I'm
edict.
not going to kill them. I'm just going to let them die slowly.
Right.
So I think we can begin to glean a little of the bizarre derangement I mentioned in the beginning that the cult of Jesus has on those already predisposed to sadism. Here's a cute anecdote from Teresa herself, told, I guess, as a folksy laugh about an exchange she had with a person in her care dying agonizingly from advanced cancer. She told him, "You are suffering like Christ on the cross, so Jesus must be kissing you." He replied, "Then please tell him to stop kissing me." She was smiling all the while in this retelling.
God.
And as you mentioned before, you're talking about the money, and before anybody says, they were poor nuns in Calcutta with little to work with, leave them alone. Former members of the order opened and deposited donors' checks that over time added up to tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars that just sat uselessly accumulating in the order's bank accounts. So there was beyond plenty of money to deal with the suffering, but that was never the point.
Right. She didn't believe in treating the sufferer.
No, Teresa did not get into the nun business to alleviate pain and poverty. She rather chose to celebrate it, to glory in the gift Christ gave the poor of knowing his pain. So,
And she genuinely believed that. Like that,
Yes.
You're not making that up.
No.
It's you read the Hitchens book and it's like, it's clear. This isn't just like you exaggerating to
No.
make her sound like a monster. She genuinely believed that suffering made them closer to Jesus.
That's right.
So why would she alleviate their suffering?
Right.
Why not enhance it?
And she was one of the staunchest, I'm sure you'll cover this, one of the staunchest anti-abortion activists
Oh, yes.
on the planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
She lived in an overpopulated, regions that were suffering tremendously from that.
Yeah. Anyone who's been to India can see the advantages of having abortions.
So you're right. She
available.
didn't want to lessen pain. She wanted to glorify it, increase it.
That's exactly right. So, in the same way that her almighty Christian God had the ability to actually help the sick and dying, she just went out of her way not to. So,
Can I just clarify something? I didn't mean, by the way, that Indians need to abort their babies
No.
because they're from India. It's just a very populous country.
Dan's alone in that particular.
That's all I was saying.
Cody, can you put in the sound effect of me running down a hallway?
Yeah.
But there are too many people on Earth.
Yes. And most of them are in India.
Well, half are in India and China, but there are too many people anyway.
Yeah.
And it's not even, and it's less about there's too many. To me, the abortion thing in India is less about there's too many people than girls getting pregnant very young before they have a chance to get fully educated and make decisions about their own lives.
Right.
Just continues a cycle of poverty that is very fucking hard to get out of.
Yep.
Unless you give women back control over their reproductive cycles.
And to be fair, Dan, I feel the same way about Costco on a Sunday.
It just makes you feel like there should be more abortions.
There's too many Hindus. There's too many Mormons. That's just I don't know what to do about it.
Just start aborting. Can we just start aborting and then ask questions later?
So the real question is, how did she become such a towering figure of the 20th century? And then the very term for all that is good.
Yeah, she is a synecdoche for goodness.
That's right. So,
and yes, I did use that word.
Nice.
So it is kind of a silly story. So in 1969, she was an obscure amateur human agony hobbyist in Calcutta when the BBC hired a guy called Malcolm Muggeridge to make a short documentary about her. And aside from being a fanatical Christian, he was apparently a screwball in a lot of other ways as well, not worth going into here. So anyway, he goes off to Calcutta and gets the top-tier tour from the mother herself, meaning the death houses were all scrubbed up and made to look real nice.
Sure.
His camera guy had some new low-light film from Kodak. This is 69, so a lot of this technology was just pretty new. So greatly impressed by Teresa, Muggeridge asked the cameraman to shoot in the dismal, darkened House of the Dying. The guy thought it was way too dark, but he threw in the low-light film in case it might work. So then they get back to London, and when they got it developed, they were all looking at it, all the film together in a projection room, and the cameraman was super happy the low-light film had worked as promised. Muggeridge exclaimed that it was divine light.
Oh, God.
That the strange little Albanian sadist was somehow also radioactive, like causing a visible image to appear on the negative, I guess. So as insane as that seems, and it is, that is also the ridiculous basis for the legendary status that fast-tracked her towards a speed record-breaking sainthood.
Is it one of the miracles that they used to beatify
It was her first miracle.
Really?
Yeah.
The miracle of the visible video?
The divine light.
God,
The miracle of quick-acting silver nitrate.
Right. So Muggeridge's rosy portrait of Mother Teresa as a saintly woman made it into the Western bloodstream, and the infection spread. In the BBC documentary about her, Hitchens quotes Mark Twain quite brilliantly here. Give a man a reputation as an early riser, and that man can sleep till noon.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, this first documentary happens about her, and he just glows about her and stuff, and then he's just painted the picture for forever.
Right, and this guy Muggeridge was quite elderly at the time, and he was with the old like the British High Commission in Calcutta in like the 1930s.
Right.
So he's an old Indian Raj colonialist.
Right.
So
First Order, just they're the savages and we're the
Exactly right.
And anyone who's willing to even help them is a saint.
Right.
He's got a monocle and a mustache. That's who this guy is.
Right. I mean, to him, it was like looking at somebody taking care of feral cats. You'd be like, "Oh, isn't that nice?"
He's the kind of guy that punctuated his sentences with the word "what."
He's exactly he had a riding crop. He's exactly that guy. So, in addition to that, to the fortunate timing for Teresa of this silly documentary, there's also a truism that really was the rocket fuel for her reputation, and that is that in the Western world, in order to sleep at night, needs to think that somebody somewhere is doing something about the problems in the world.
Right.
But we don't want to think about it too much, right? So Mother Teresa was the perfect symbol for that need, and then she would ultimately become a major wash cycle for so much Western guilt. So Teresa's rising international star also happened to coincide with the appearance on the papal balcony of an arch-conservative and extremely political new pope, John Paul II. The church had been leaning ever so slightly towards liberalization in the last half of the 20th century, and John Paul was going to put a fucking stop to that shit and jam that ancient Roman bitch into reverse. But he needed a sympathetic superstar to put a kind face on so much regressive policy in order to make it more palatable.
Right.
Enter Mother Teresa. So she jetted around the world in her simple blue and white sari, the very picture of humility and piety, and with a kindly smile, she excoriated any society that tolerated abortion and birth control. So the self-professed apolitical Teresa was constantly photographed with presidents, prime ministers, and kings bending their ears and endlessly lobbying to end the scourge of birth control and abortion, even in cases of rape and incest.
And like the Dalai Lama, all of those politicians and kings and princes were lining up to get a photograph.
To get a photograph with, I mean, you got sainthood by proxy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, and she was like 3'2".
Yeah.
And when she was 13 years old, looked like your grandmother. So like she had this grandmotherly thing. I don't know. She could have been. I'm looking at pictures of her right now, and any one of them, you can't tell if she's 40 or 90.
She's kind of a biblical figure.
She just looks, and she just played off of those grandmotherly looks.
She looks like the Virgin Mary's grandmother. Yeah.
Like if you say no to her, you feel bad just inherently.
Yeah. And she did it all with a smile.
Right.
So famously, she was at Knock in Ireland, and she asked the enormous crowd that had gathered to see her to pledge to never allow birth control or a single abortion in Ireland. And as we happily know from our Irish correspondent, Rudy, that pledge has not been carried to term.
Yay.
Largely because of arrogant Catholic scolds such as herself overplaying their hands.
Right.
So in addition to her very political little piety shtick, she was very popular with the despotic and criminal Catholic bad guys everywhere. She was famously close to the odious baby doc Duvalier.
Was she really?
Oh, very yeah. They
No
were
way.
the best of friends. The second consecutive murderous dictator of the same name in Haiti. And so here's the thing. Look, there's a fuck ton of suffering in the world. So taking money from whatever asshole who wants to give it so you can make someone else's life better, I'm not really against that.
That would be a good thing if that were what was happening.
Right, and that's what the much maligned Clinton Foundation did. It took money from Saudis, and what is it, like half the people who are getting AIDS treatment in Africa get it through the Clinton Foundation or something like that?
Clinton Foundation, which is going down, but we'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah, but what the Clinton Foundation doesn't offer people that Mother Teresa offered them in exchange for their dirty money was absolution.
Yeah.
So essentially a spiritual cleansing by way of the selling of an indulgence. This is made worse by the fact that she didn't really do much of anything with the money.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just a compounding of empty gestures. So she also took millions from Charles Keating, who American listeners of a certain age will recall was sent to the slammer for orchestrating a savings and loan scheme that built thousands of people out of hundreds of millions of dollars. She eagerly took advantage of his offer to use his private plane to fly all over. And when his empire imploded, she never returned the money, which was just stolen money. And in fact, when the breadth of his criminality was fully exposed, she wrote a letter to the judge in the case insisting he was a good man and should be forgiven.
Oh, that's quite an amicus brief right there.
Little weird history fact, it was Judge Ito, who was the same judge in the O.J. Simpson case.
Lance Ito. Oh, my God. That's so funny.
Random. So she was also maintaining quite an impressive trophy case, having been given the highest civilian awards in scores of countries, including India and the U.S.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like human ears or something.
No, just she was an avid doubles tennis player. Yeah, she played with Yvonne Goolagong. So in 1979, she was given the most prestigious of them all, the Nobel Peace Prize. I have no fucking idea what they thought her contribution to world peace was, but such was her legend, right? Now, according to Teresa, in her acceptance speech, the greatest threat to peace in the world was, wait for it,
pumpkins.
Abortion.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I win.
Let's remember 1979. 1979 was near the height of Cold War tensions, with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, proxy wars in Central America and Africa, the Khmer Rouge annihilating their own people in Cambodia, insane apartheid violence in South Africa, and tens of thousands of nukes pointed at each other all over the globe. The greatest threat to world peace was women having some control over their own bodies and futures. Sure, lady.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where anti-abortion people love to say things like, well, what if that child that you aborted
was Albert Einstein?
Or was going to be the one who cured cancer,
Which is the single dumbest argument made about anything ever.
right? Because also, what if it was Hitler?
What if it was Hitler?
What if Hitler's mom had just been like, no, not this one?
What if it was Super Del Shanzi? Then where would we be?
Local listeners just perked up right now.
Utah deep cut right there.
Little Utah kiss there. So as people lay untreated in pain in her houses of death and tens of millions of dollars languished unused in her bank accounts, poor Teresa developed heart problems.
No.
And true to her calling, and surely not to be seen as a hypocrite, She spared no expense as she traveled in private planes and commercial first class to seek the most modern and expensive treatments from the world's best doctors and hospitals.
Oh,
Fuck that.
my
Because
God.
Jesus. And just to put a little enraging icing on the whole agony cake, in letters published after her death, she frequently wrote to the Pope in her later years, expressing profound doubts in the existence of God. So the woman who smiled brightly
Oh, my God.
over people with stage 4 bone cancer as they writhed was in serious doubt about the God on whose behalf she was increasing their pain.
Jesus.
So strip away the unconscionable but tiny veneer of belief in a God who demanded human suffering as sacrifice, and what's left to explain her sadism?
Albanians.
Goodbye, Albanian listeners. So anyway, that's Mother Teresa.
Wow.
Did she help some people? I mean, sure.
No, maybe.
Did she hurt some people? Abso-fucking-lutely. Did she do it for bizarre blood and torture cult reasons that she herself even doubted the point of? You bet.
Amazing.
Should she be used as the yardstick by which truly good people in this world are measured? I'm going to go with no.
Yeah, it's funny because what people think she did, because everybody that holds her up as this saint,
Yeah.
they believe that she helped poor people in India. Like, they believe that that's what she did. She nursed people who needed nursing or
Right.
whatever. She didn't, but that's what they believe she did.
Right.
So if she was the person that they thought she was, then great.
Right.
But she wasn't.
She wasn't.
She was a monster.
She was a monster, and if nothing else, she took advantage of people in terrible situations to make them secretly Catholic because love.
Yeah.
So fuck that shit. Let's move on.
All right.